Bring in now Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He is a member of the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack. Congressman, thanks for being with us this morning. That 2-hour presentation last night offered a very clear picture, the beginning of it anyway, of what happened on January 6th and what led up to it. There's been so much fog and misinformation around those events, particularly from one side of the aisle over the last year and a half. So what stood out to you as you began to look through this information? To a lot of us, it was that Donald Trump and the White House knew that it was all a lie, that there was fraud in the election. They knew that he had lost, and yet they continued. They persisted with this effort to overturn the results. And also, we were stunned to see and to hear last night the effect to which the former president did nothing on January 6th to defend the United States Capitol and to defend the country. What jumped out to you?
Well, we dispelled the thick fog of propaganda that Trump and his supporters continue to emit about what happened. It's very clear Donald Trump was hell-bent on staying in office, regardless of what the American people had to say about it. He promoted the big lie. They propagandized people with the big lie. And then he engaged in this multi-step conspiracy to try to destroy Joe Biden's lawful majority in the Electoral College, culminating on January 6th, where they unleashed terrible mob violence against our police officers. And I was thinking last night, the thing that jumped out at me as I was looking at this was you have a party which now claims to be on the side of law enforcement and the police, and yet are turning a total blind eye to the most vicious, massive assault on police officers any of us has ever seen in our lifetime by a domestic mob. And they're trying to, sweep it under the rug, as Kevin McCarthy said he wouldn't do, but that's precisely what they're trying to do. They're trying to cover up the whole thing. So I think the public is starting to get the picture of 3 rings of sedition that took place on January 6th. One ring was this crowd that turned into a violent mob that set upon the police. A middle ring of insurrection of domestic violent extremist groups like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the QAnon networks, the militia groups, which smashed our windows, attacked our police, and then led the occupation of the Capitol, driving members of Congress out of the Capitol and shutting down the peaceful transfer of power for the first time in American history. But then finally, the inner realm of the coup, those that Donald Trump had convinced to spread the lie around the country with, and then were willing to do anything in order to keep him in office. And we're going to tell the specifics and details of that story. What you've seen so far, as shocking as it is just a fraction of the evidence that we've assembled.
And there'll be more hearings, we know, even coming up this next week, 3 of them. One of the other elements of this story, which is so critical, and again, to go to the disinformation that's been spread out there, that this was somehow spontaneous, that it was a rally at the Ellipse, people marched peacefully to the Capitol, and then somehow it got out of hand. The story that you all in the committee laid out last night was that, no, this was a plot. This was an attempted coup that involved the President of the United States, but also the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who went to Washington with a very specific plan.
Well, Stuart Rhodes, a leader of the Oath Keepers, said we don't get out of this without civil war. And we have lots of statements and email messages, tweets, and so on of insurrectionists clearly planning on violence in order to make this happen. And I was listening to Mr. Gutenberg speak before. There were thousands of arms that were brought to Washington, and they had been left in cars and hotels, in motels, until the right moment struck. And so we are very lucky about a number of things that happened, but one of them was that they did not decide to unleash this arsenal against us.
Congressman, we've seen just a portion of the evidence that has been gathered in this first of several hearings that will be held. You, I assume, have seen all of the evidence that has been gathered that you just alluded to. You're a lawyer. So let me ask you, as a personal question, as a lawyer, do you think you've seen enough where you could go and get charges leveled against Donald Trump based upon his intent to overthrow a free election?
Well, you don't have to trust me. You can actually trust a sitting judge, Judge Carter, United States District Court judge in California, who's sitting on the John Eastman litigation, who's been so astonished by what he's seen, that he has said repeatedly now that it is likely that Donald Trump engaged in federal criminal offenses. And so we have put in our pleadings that there was evidence of conspiracy to block and impede a federal proceeding, and there was a conspiracy to defraud the people of the United States and the U.S. government out of this free and fair election. So I think that's the least that can be said. The one minor correction is I've not seen all of the evidence because we have hundreds of thousands of pages of documents and more than 1,000 witnesses. And unfortunately, I wasn't there for all of them. It was impossible for us. But I've seen a lot of it, and I know the basic core elements of this offense. There were not hundreds, but thousands of crimes committed along the way. But all of it, as our chair said last night, was for the purpose of staging a coup against the people's election. And if we're going to allow a sitting president to dishonor the results of an election, then we no longer are a constitutional democracy.
Member of the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Congressman Jamie Raskin, thank you very much for being on the show this morning.